The morning air was crisp against my skin as I finished my usual 10-mile run through the park. At 24, my life moved at a sprint. Marathons on weekends, mountain trails on weekdays, and a restless energy that rarely let me sit still for long. My apartment felt too small for the life I wanted to live, and I'd finally decided I needed a running partner. Someone who could keep pace with my sunrise jogs and wouldn't judge me for choosing a Saturday hike over brunch with friends. The Riverside Animal Shelter sat at the edge of town, a low brick building that hummed with the chaotic energy of dozens of dogs all vying for attention. I'd done my research, scrolled through their website, and circled three high-energy breeds in my notebook: a young Labrador mix, a Border Collie, and an Australian Shepherd whose profile promised endless stamina. I pushed through the double doors and the smell hit me first, a mixture of disinfectant, wet fur, and something earthier I couldn't quite name. The lobby was bright, almost aggressively cheerful, with its painted paw prints on the walls and bulletin board covered in success stories. A woman at the front desk looked up with practice enthusiasm. "Here to meet someone special?" she asked. "I'm looking for an active dog," I said, pulling out my phone to show her my list. "I run about 50 miles a week and I need—" "Say no more," she smiled. "Let me get Maya. She knows all our athletes." I waited, listening to the distant symphony of barking that echoed from somewhere deeper in the building. The sound was almost musical in its chaos. High yips, deep woofs, and the occasional howl that made me smile. These were dogs full of life, full of energy, exactly what I was looking for. Maya appeared from a side hallway, and I immediately noticed the exhaustion etched into the corners of her eyes. She was maybe 32, with her dark hair pulled back in a messy bun and purple scrubs that seen better days. But her smile was genuine when she shook my hand. "Elara, right? I hear you're looking for a running buddy." "That's the plan," I said. "I've got my eye on that border collie. Duke, he's amazing." Maya grabbed a clipboard. "Let me take you through the active kennels first." We walked through a corridor lined with chain link enclosures, dogs pressed against the metal, their tails wagging so hard their entire bodies shook. Duke, the border collie, was doing circles in his kennel, a blur of black and white energy. The lab mix was play bowing, barking an invitation. Every dog we passed seemed to vibrate with potential. But then the hallway took a turn, and the atmosphere shifted. The noise didn't disappear exactly, but it changed quality, became more distant. The fluorescent lights seemed dimmer here, or maybe it was just the contrast. These kennels were quieter, occupied by dogs who lay curled in corners or stood with heads lowered. "This is our medical ward," Maya said softly, and I heard the weight in her voice. "Dogs recovering from illness or injury." I should have turned back. This wasn't what I came for. But something made me slow my steps, made me look into each kennel as we passed. And then I saw him. In the last cage on the left, there was a medium-sized dog with a brindle coat that might have been beautiful if it weren't so dull. But it wasn't his appearance that stopped me. It was his posture. His head rested on his front paws as if it were made of lead, too heavy to lift. His eyes were open, staring at nothing, and his breathing was shallow enough that I had to watch carefully to see his ribs move. There was no barking from his kennel, no tail wag, no acknowledgement of our presence at all. "That's Beau," Maya said quietly. The weight of those two words settled over me like a blanket. That's Beau. Not "this is Beau" or "meet Beau," just an acknowledgement of existence, as if that was all there was left to say. I found myself crouching in front of Beau's kennel, my fingers curling around the cold chain link. Up close, I could see more details that made my chest tighten. His gums, visible where his lip pulled back slightly, were almost white, the color of old parchment rather than healthy pink. His eyes, though open, had a glassy quality, like windows to a room where all the lights had been turned off. "What's wrong with him?" I asked. Maya knelt beside me, her clipboard resting against her knees. "Severe anemia secondary to tick-borne disease, probably ehrlichiosis or babyosis. We're still waiting on some test results to confirm which one." The medical terms meant little to me then, but I would learn them by heart in the weeks to come. What I understood at that moment was simpler and more devastating. This dog was dying from the inside out. Can you explain that in terms I can understand? Maya's expression softened. She'd probably had this conversation 100 times, but she spoke as if it were the first. Imagine your blood is like a delivery service, right? Red blood cells are the trucks that carry oxygen to every part of your body, your muscles, your brain, your heart. Without enough of those trucks, nothing works properly. She gestured towards Beau, whose chest rose and fell with visible effort. Tick-borne diseases attack those trucks. Some of them destroy red blood cells directly, like babyosis. Others, like ehrlichiosis, damage the bone marrow that makes the cells in the first place. Either way, the result is the same. His blood can't carry enough oxygen to keep him functioning normally. I watched Beau breathe, each inhalation seeming to require conscious effort. So every movement feels like climbing a mountain, Maya finished. His heart is racing, trying to compensate, pumping harder to move what little oxygen he has. Even wagging his tail would be exhausting. Lifting his head might feel impossible. The silence in his kennel suddenly made terrible sense. This wasn't a lazy dog or a depressed dog. This was a dog whose body had betrayed him, whose very blood had become a burden instead of a lifeline. "Can I touch him?" I asked. Maya hesitated, then nodded. "Gently. He's very weak." She unlocked the kennel, and I eased inside, making myself small and unthreatening. The space smelled of clean blankets and something medicinal. I sat cross-legged on the concrete floor, just out of reach, and waited. Beau's eyes tracked toward me, the only acknowledgement of my presence. I could see his nose twitching slightly, processing my scent, but he made no move to investigate further. "Hey, buddy," I whispered. "I'm Elara." Slowly, carefully, I extended my hand, palm down, letting it rest on the floor between us. Minutes passed. My knees started to ache from the hard floor, but I didn't move. And then, so subtle I almost missed it, Beau's nose extended just far enough to brush my fingertips. The touch was feather-light, barely contact at all, but I felt it like an electric current. "He's not lazy," I said, my voice catching. "He's starving for oxygen." Yes, that's exactly right. Maya's office was small and cluttered, with filing cabinets that didn't quite close, and a desk covered in paperwork. She gestured for me to sit in the chair across from her and pulled out a thick folder labeled Beau, Intake Number 3847. "Let me tell you his story," she said, and I heard the weariness in her voice. "Found him 3 weeks ago wandering near the highway. No collar, no chip, covered in ticks. We removed over 200 of them." My stomach turned at the image. By the time we got blood work back, his red blood cell count was critical. The normal range for a dog is 37 to 55%. Beau's was 14%. I didn't know enough to understand the numbers, but Maya's expression told me everything I needed to know. We started treatment immediately. Antibiotics, iron supplements, supportive care. He's improved slightly. He's at 18% now, but he's plateaued. And that's where the problem comes in. She leaned back in her chair, rubbing her temples. "Elara, I've been doing this for 8 years. I've seen dogs bounce back from incredible things, but I've also learned to recognize the reality of shelter resources." "What are you saying?" "She's on our red list." She opened a drawer and pulled out a laminated sheet of paper with names and dates. Beau's name was third from the top, with a date circled in red marker. 5 days from now. That's his deadline. If he's not adopted or transferred to rescue by then... She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't have to. "But he's getting better," I protested. "You said he improved." "He did, but he can't show well to a doctor's, Elara. When people come here, they want a dog who runs to the front of the kennel, who wags and jumps and shows personality. Beau can't do any of that. He looks..." She struggled for words. "He looks broken beyond repair, even though he isn't." The injustice of it hit me like a physical blow. So you're going to kill him because he can't perform for strangers while he's sick? We're going to euthanize him because we have 30 dogs waiting for his kennel space and limited medical funds and a waiting list of healthy, adoptable animals that are being turned away. Maya's voice was steady but strained. I hate it. I hate every name on this list, but this is the reality of shelter work. I looked at the red list again, at the names above and below Beau's. Each one represented a dog whose time had run out, whose chance at life had been measured and found wanting. What would he need, I asked, to recover fully? Maya pulled out another sheet, a medical care plan covered in veterinary terminology and cost estimates, continued antibiotics for at least 4 more weeks, iron supplementation, follow-up blood work every week to monitor his progress, probably another month of strictly limited activity while his bone marrow recovers. Best case scenario, if he responds well, he could be close to normal in 2 to 3 months. And worst case? Worst case, the disease has caused permanent damage and he'll always be fragile, or the treatment fails and we lose him anyway. She met my eyes. I won't lie to you, this is a significant commitment for an uncertain outcome. I thought about my marathon training schedule, my weekend hiking plans, my carefully curated life of constant motion. Beau couldn't be part of that life. Not now. Maybe not ever. Can I see him again? I asked. I sat in Beau's kennel for over an hour. Maya had gone back to work, and the afternoon light slanted through a high window, casting geometric shadows across the concrete floor. Beau hadn't moved except to blink occasionally, his breathing steady but labored. My phone buzzed, a text from my best friend, Jasmine. "Did you get your running dog? Send pics." I took a photo of Beau, his head still resting on his paws, his dull coat, his closed-off expression, and stared at it for a long moment before deleting it. How could I explain this to anyone? How could I explain that I'd walked into a shelter looking for an athlete and found a dog who couldn't even lift his head? Another text came through, this time from Marcus, a guy I'd been casually dating. "Still on for that trail run tomorrow morning?" I looked at Beau, then back at my phone. My thumb hovered over the keyboard. Tomorrow morning, I was supposed to be running 15 miles through the state park, training for a half marathon in 6 weeks. I'd been looking forward to it all week. "What am I doing?" I whispered to the silent dog. Beau's eyes shifted toward me, and for just a moment, I could have sworn I saw something flicker in their depths. Not hope, exactly, but perhaps a question. A quiet inquiry about whether anyone was finally seeing him. I called Jasmine. "Hey, did you find your perfect match?" Her voice was bright with enthusiasm. "Jazz, I need to tell you something, and I need you not to think I'm crazy." There was a pause. "Okay, now I'm worried." I described Beau, his condition, his prognosis, the red list. With each word, I could feel the absurdity of what I was considering. I'd known this dog for less than 2 hours. I had no experience nursing sick animals. My apartment had a strict pet deposit, and my landlord would need to approve any adoption. "Elara," said Jasmine slowly when I finished, "are you seriously thinking about adopting a dying dog?" "He's not dying. He's sick. There's a difference." "Is there? From what you're describing, there is," I said firmly. "He just needs time and care, and someone who doesn't need him to be something he can't be right now." "But you specifically wanted an active dog. You wanted a running partner." I looked at Beau again, at the subtle rise and fall of his rib cage, at the way his eyes remained open even though his body couldn't move. "I know, but maybe he doesn't need to run with me. Maybe he just needs to breathe with me." The words surprised me even as I said them. They felt true in a way I couldn't fully articulate. Jasmine was quiet for a long moment. "You're really going to do this, aren't you?" "I think I am." Then I'm coming over this weekend to help you dog-proof your apartment. And you're going to need me to send you every article I can find on canine anemia. I felt my eyes sting with unexpected tears. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. You're about to be sleep-deprived, broke, and covered in dog hair. But, she paused, I think maybe you're seeing something the rest of us can't. What's that? The invisible soul. After we hung up, I found Maya in the medical supply room, counting bottles of medication. I'm taking him home. Beau. I'm adopting him. Maya turned slowly, a bottle of antibiotics in her hand. Elara, are you sure? This isn't going to be easy. I'm sure. He doesn't need to be easy. He just needs to be given a chance. Something shifted in Maya's expression. Relief mixed with something deeper, something that looked like gratitude. Okay, let me get the paperwork started. But first, let me teach you how to care for him. The sun was setting by the time we had everything ready. Adoption papers signed, medications packaged with detailed instructions, a follow-up appointment scheduled at the veterinary clinic for 3 days later. Maya had given me a crash course in caring for an anemic dog. Watch for pale gums turning even paler, monitor his breathing rate, keep him calm and quiet, avoid any excitement that could strain his heart. Ready to take him to your car? Maya asked. I nodded, and we walked back to Beau's kennel together. He was in the same position as before, head down, eyes half closed now in the dimming light. Beau, Maya said softly, kneeling beside him, you're going home, buddy. She slipped a leash onto his collar, a gentle, practiced motion, and then looked at me. We'll need to carry him. The parking lot is too far for him to walk. I can carry him, I said. Maya gave me an appraising look. He's about 45 pounds of dead weight, are you sure? I'd deadlifted heavier weights at the gym, but weights didn't have heartbeats or shallow breathing or the vulnerability of a living creature trusting you completely. Still, I nodded. Together, we maneuvered our arms under Beau's body, Maya supporting his front half, me taking his hindquarters. On a count of 3, we lifted. The weight was immediate and absolute. Not just the physical pounds, but the psychological burden of knowing how fragile he was, how easy it would be to jostle him wrong, to cause pain or distress. Beau made a small sound, not quite a whimper, but an exhale of resignation, and his head lolled against Maya's shoulder. I've got you, I whispered, though I wasn't sure if I was talking to Beau or myself. We moved slowly through the shelter, past the kennels of barking dogs, through the lobby where a volunteer looked up with wide eyes, and out into the parking lot where the evening air was cool and smelled of rain. My car was at the far end, and with each step I became more aware of the weight in my arms, not just physical, but emotional. This was a heavy soul, burdened by illness and abandonment and the accumulated trauma of being failed by the world. Maya helped me settle Beau into the back seat where I'd laid out blankets and towels. He immediately collapsed onto his side, his breathing slightly more labored from the exertion of being moved. Remember, Maya said, handing me a folder thick with medical records and care instructions. No excitement, no stress. Think of him as being on complete bed rest. Even happiness can be dangerous right now. His heart can't handle sudden increases in oxygen demand. I understand. She handed me a card with her personal cell phone number written on it. Call me, anytime, day or night, I mean it. I took the card, feeling the weight of her concern and her hope in equal measure. Thank you, Maya, for everything. Thank him, she gestured to Beau. He's the one fighting. The drive home took 20 minutes that felt like hours. I kept glancing in the rearview mirror, checking that Beau was still breathing, still holding on. Every bump in the road made me wince, imagining his discomfort. When we finally pulled into my apartment complex, I sat in the car for a long moment, gathering my courage for what came next. Carrying Beau from the car to my second floor apartment was one of the hardest things I'd ever done. Not because of the physical challenge, but because of the terrible intimacy of feeling his heartbeat against my chest, rapid and weak like a hummingbird's wings in a storm. My apartment had never felt so small or so inadequate. I'd set up a corner of the living room with soft bedding, water bowls, and a quiet space away from the windows. I lowered Beau onto the blankets as gently as I could, and he immediately arranged himself in that same position, head on paws, eyes open but vacant. "Welcome home, Beau," I said softly. He didn't respond. I hadn't expected him to. The first night was endless. Maya had sent me home with 4 different medications: doxycycline for the tick-borne infection, iron supplements to help rebuild his red blood cells, a probiotic to protect his stomach from the harsh antibiotics, and a vitamin B12 injection I would need to administer weekly. I laid everything out on my kitchen counter and read through the instructions 3 times, my hands shaking slightly. The doxycycline needed to be given with food, the iron supplement on an empty stomach, the probiotic an hour after the antibiotic. It was a complex choreography that needed to happen twice daily. "Okay, Beau," I said, kneeling beside him with the first pill. "Let's do this together." He didn't open his mouth. Why would he? He had no reason to trust that I was trying to help rather than hurt. I tried the method Maya had shown me, gently opening his jaw, placing the pill far back on his tongue, holding his mouth closed while stroking his throat to encourage swallowing. But Beau was so weak that even this simple process seemed to drain what little energy he had. After the 3rd attempt, the pill fell out, wet and useless, onto the blanket. I sat back on my heels, fighting frustration. "I'm sorry," I whispered. "I'm new at this." It took 15 minutes to get the first pill down. The second took longer. By the time I'd administered all the evening medications, an hour had passed, and both Beau and I were exhausted. The iron supplement was supposed to be given with water, but Beau couldn't seem to coordinate the act of drinking while lying down. His tongue would lap weakly at the bowl, but most of the water just pooled around his muzzle. I ended up soaking a clean cloth in water and letting him suckle on it, a painstaking process that reminded me of descriptions I'd read of nursing newborn animals. Every few drops counted. Every small amount of hydration was a victory. By midnight, I'd made a nest of blankets on the kitchen floor next to Beau's bed. I couldn't sleep in my bedroom. I needed to be close enough to hear his breathing, to monitor any changes in his condition. I lay there in the dark, listening to the sound of his lungs working, counting the breaths like a meditation. Inhale, 1, 2, 3, 4. Exhale, 1, 2, 3. The rhythm was faster than it should be, his body compensating for the lack of oxygen-carrying capacity. Every few minutes, I would reach out and gently touch his side, feeling the rise and fall of his ribs, reassuring myself that he was still alive. At 2 a.m., my phone buzzed. A text from Maya. "How's he doing?" "Still breathing. Still fighting," I typed back. "Is it normal for him to be this weak?" Yes. The first few days are the hardest. His body is trying to fight the infection while also dealing with severe anemia. It's like trying to run a marathon while suffocating. I looked at Beau's still form. How do I know if he's getting worse? Watch his gums. If they turn gray or blue, that's an emergency. It means he's not getting enough oxygen. Watch his breathing. If it becomes gasping or ragged, call me immediately. And trust your instincts. You'll know if something changes. "Thank you," I sent it back. "You're doing great, Elara. The fact that you're watching him this closely means everything." But I didn't feel like I was doing great. I felt terrified and out of my depth, and desperately afraid that I'd made a promise to this dog that I couldn't keep. The night stretched on. At some point, I must have dozed off because I woke up with a start to find weak sunlight filtering through the kitchen window. My neck was stiff from the awkward angle on the floor, and my first coherent thought was, is he still alive? I scrambled to check on Beau. His eyes were open, watching me with that same distant expression. His breathing was unchanged. He had survived the night. I burst into tears, great gulping sobs of relief and exhaustion and fear. Beau didn't react to my crying, but I thought I saw his eyes track to my face, acknowledging my presence in his quiet, minimal way. "Day 1 complete," I whispered, wiping my eyes. Just a lot more days to go." The days blurred together in a routine of medications, monitoring, and waiting. Jasmine came over on the second day with groceries and moral support, and Marcus sent a text saying he understood if I needed to take a break from our running dates. My marathon training fell by the wayside. My social life contracted to the size of my living room. Every morning, I would check Beau's gums first thing, lifting his lip gently to see if there was any change in color. They remained stubbornly pale, neither better nor worse. Every evening, I would try to coax him into eating a little more, drinking a little more, engaging a little more with the world around him. But Beau remained in what Maya called the holding pattern, not deteriorating, but not improving either. He stayed in his corner, head down, conserving every ounce of energy for the basic functions of survival. On day 4, I started to doubt myself. I sat on the floor next to Beau, watching him breathe, and felt the weight of responsibility pressing down on me. What if I was just prolonging his suffering? What if the kind thing would have been to let him go peacefully at the shelter, rather than dragging him through this drawn-out decline? "Am I being selfish?" I asked him. "Keeping you here because I want to believe I can save you?" Beau didn't answer. He never did. I called Maya, and she picked up on the second ring. "I need you to be honest with me," I said, without preamble. "Is he suffering?" There was a pause. When Maya spoke, her voice was thoughtful, careful. "Pain and suffering aren't the same thing, Elara. Is his body struggling? Yes. Is it uncomfortable? Probably. But is he in acute pain? I don't think so. The disease itself isn't painful. It's exhausting, depleting, but not usually painful. And the fact that he's eating, drinking, and resting comfortably suggests he's not in distress. Then why do I feel like I'm torturing him? Because recovery isn't linear. It's not a steady climb from sick to healthy. Sometimes it's a plateau. Sometimes it's 2 steps forward and 1 step back. And when you're watching someone you care about struggle, that plateau feels unbearable. I looked at Beau, at the way his eyes remained open even in his exhaustion, at the subtle movement of his nostrils as he processed the scents around him. "How do I know if I should keep fighting or let him go?" I asked. "Watch his eyes," Maya said. "I know that sounds simplistic, but I mean it. A dog who's ready to give up will have a vacant, disconnected look. A dog who's still fighting will track movement, will respond to sounds, will show interest in their surroundings, even if they can't physically engage. What do you see when you look at Beau's eyes?" I leaned closer, studying his face. His eyes shifted toward me, a small movement, but deliberate. There was something there, behind the exhaustion. Not quite hope, maybe, but not resignation either. "I see someone who's waiting," I said. "Then keep waiting with him." That night, I started talking to Beau, not expecting responses, but just filling the silence with my voice. I told him about my day, about the emails I'd answered for work, about the show I'd half-watched on TV. I told him about my first marathon, about the wall I'd hit at mile 20 and how I'd wanted to quit but kept going because I'd made a promise to myself. "I made a promise to you, too," I said softly, "that you wouldn't have to run with me, just breathe with me. So that's what we're doing. We're breathing together." His ear twitched slightly. It was the first voluntary movement I'd seen from him in days. I started celebrating the non-movements, the tiny signs of awareness that didn't require physical strength. The way his eyes would follow me when I moved around the room, the way his nose would twitch when I cooked dinner, the way his breathing would change rhythm slightly when I spoke to him. These weren't the victories I'd imagined when I walked into the shelter, but they were victories nonetheless. It happened at 3:17 a.m. on the 8th day. I'd been asleep, really asleep, for the first time in over a week, my body finally convinced that Beau was stable enough that I could stop my hyper-vigilant watch. The sound that woke me was soft, just a gentle thud, but in the silence of the apartment, it was enough to jolt me awake. I scrambled off the couch, my heart racing, and rushed to Beau's corner. He wasn't lying down. For the first time since I'd brought him home, Beau was sitting up. Not standing, that would have been too much, but sitting with his haunches beneath him, his front legs straight, and his head was up. Not just up, but lifted in a way that seemed purposeful, deliberate. The weight that had seemed too heavy to bear was being borne. And his eyes were looking directly at me with a clarity I'd never seen before. "Beau?" I whispered, afraid to move, afraid to breathe, afraid this moment would shatter if I acknowledged it too loudly. His tail moved. Just the faintest twitch, not even a full wag, but movement. Intentional, conscious movement that had nothing to do with breathing or survival and everything to do with communication. I sank to my knees in front of him, tears streaming down my face. "Hey, buddy. Hey, you're here. You're really here." Our eyes met, truly met, for the first time. Not the distant, glassy look of someone conserving energy, but the direct gaze of a being who was seeing and being seen. At that moment, I understood what Maya had meant about watching his eyes. This was the look of someone who had chosen to fight, who had decided that life was worth the enormous effort it took to lift his head. "Welcome back," I whispered. Beau held my gaze for a long moment, and then, slowly, carefully, as if testing the limits of what his body could do, he lowered his muzzle toward my outstretched hand. The touch was gentle, exploratory. His nose was warm and slightly damp against my palm. It was the first time he had initiated contact. I stayed frozen, barely breathing, as Beau investigated my hand with his nose. His movements were weak and uncoordinated, like someone relearning how their body worked, but they were movements nonetheless. After a minute, the effort seemed to exhaust him. His head wavered, and I could see the strain in his muscles. Gently, I reached out and supported his head with both hands, taking some of the weight. "You did so good," I told him. "You're so strong, Beau, so incredibly strong." He let me hold his head for a moment longer, and then, with obvious effort, pulled back and lowered himself back down to his resting position. But this time, he didn't close off. His eyes remained alert, watching me. And when I stayed sitting beside him, he released a long sigh that sounded almost like contentment. I called Maya. "It's 3 in the morning," she answered, her voice thick with sleep. "He lifted his head." There was a pause, and then I heard the sound of rustling as she sat up. "What?" "Beau, he sat up. He lifted his head and looked at me, Maya. Really looked at me." "Elara, that's amazing. That's the breakthrough we've been waiting for. It means his red blood cell count is improving, that his body is finally getting enough oxygen to do more than just survive." We talked for another 20 minutes, making plans for increased food intake, discussing when we might try short walks, celebrating this milestone that must have seemed so small to anyone who didn't understand what it represented. When I hung up, Beau was still watching me, his eyes bright in the dim light. "This is your heart-bound moment," I told him, remembering Maya's phrase. "The moment your blood is finally carrying enough life to fuel your will." The change wasn't immediate, recovery never is, but it was undeniable. Day by day, Beau's presence in the world became more solid, more real. On day 10, his gums had shifted from pale parchment to a soft pink. I called the vet clinic and they moved up his blood work appointment. The results came back with numbers that made the technician actually cheer. His red blood cell count had climbed to 26%, still below normal, but high enough to make a tangible difference in his quality of life. On day 12, Beau stood up on his own for the first time. I'd been preparing his breakfast when I heard the scrabble of nails on hardwood. I turned to find him on his feet, wobbling slightly, but standing, his tail giving a tentative wag. "Look at you," I said, trying to keep my voice calm even though I wanted to scream with joy. "Look at you standing!" He took one step toward me, unsteady, like a foal finding its legs, and then sat down heavily, the effort too much. But he'd done it. He'd wanted breakfast enough to try. On day 15, I decided to risk a short trip to the backyard. I'd been keeping Beau inside, following the vet's orders for strict rest, but I could see the way his nose twitched at the window, the way his eyes tracked birds flying past. He needed more than 4 walls. I carried him down the stairs, he was still too weak for them, and set him gently on the grass. For a long moment, he just stood there, his nose working overtime, processing the 1,000 scents of the outside world. And then a leaf blew past. It was a small brown leaf skittering across the grass in the autumn breeze. Beau's eyes locked onto it with an intensity I'd never seen. His body tensed, just a little, just enough, and then he pounced. Or tried to. What actually happened was more of a clumsy lunge that ended with him stumbling and sitting down hard. But the intent was there, the playfulness, the joy of chasing something just because it moved. I started laughing, great breathless peals of laughter that startled Beau and made him look at me with confusion. But then his tail started wagging, a real wag this time, his whole back end wiggling with the effort, and I knew he understood. "You're a playful dog," I said, kneeling beside him and running my hands through his coat, which was already starting to regain some of its luster. "You were always a playful dog. You were just waiting to have the strength to show me." We stayed in the backyard for 10 minutes, a short visit by any normal dog standards, but a marathon for Beau. When I carried him back upstairs, he was panting slightly, but his eyes were bright with satisfaction. That night, for the first time, Beau didn't sleep in his corner. He climbed, slowly, carefully, onto the couch where I was sitting and collapsed against my side, his head resting on my lap. Not because he was too weak to hold it up, but because he'd chosen to put it there. 3 months later, Beau and I went on our first hike. It wasn't the challenging mountain trail I'd planned when I first decided to adopt a dog. It was a flat, easy loop around the lake, just 2 miles with plenty of rest stops. But as I watched Beau trot ahead of me, his tail high and his coat gleaming in the sunlight, I couldn't imagine anything more perfect. His red blood cell count was at 42%, within normal range. His energy, while not boundless, was consistent. He could play, run short distances, and investigate every interesting smell with the enthusiasm of a dog who had been given a second chance at life. We stopped at a clearing overlooking the water, and I sat on a bench while Beau explored the immediate area. He found a stick, worried about it for a moment, then brought it to me. His first attempt at fetch. We played for a few minutes, his movements still slightly clumsy but full of determination, before he tired and came to sit beside me. I ran my hand through his fur, marveling at how far we'd come from that silent kennel at the shelter. The dog who couldn't lift his head was now nudging my hand for more attention, his eyes bright and his tail wagging. My phone buzzed. A text for Maya. "How's my favorite success story?" I took a photo of Beau with the lake in the background and sent it to her. "Living his best life. Thank you for everything. Thank you for seeing what everyone else missed. How many miles today?" "Just 2. We're taking it slow." Slow is perfect. Slow means you're both present. I looked at Beau, who had laid his head in my lap, not from exhaustion this time, but from choice, from trust, from love. "You know what I learned from you?" I asked him, scratching behind his ears. "I learned that the loudest dogs aren't always the ones who need us most. I learned that sometimes the quietest souls are just waiting for someone to give them the strength to love." Beau's tail thumped against the bench. I came to that shelter looking for a high-energy athlete, someone who could keep up with my running schedule and my type A personality. And I found you, instead. A dog who taught me that real strength isn't about how fast you can run or how high you can jump. It's about holding on when your blood can't carry oxygen. It's about lifting your head when it feels like lead. It's about choosing to fight when giving up would be so much easier. A jogger passed by, and Beau's ears perked up with interest. 6 months ago, he wouldn't have had the energy to notice. 3 months ago, he would have been too weak to care. Now he watched with the benign curiosity of a dog who was comfortable in his world and his body. We stayed at the lake for another hour, watching the water and the birds and the other dogs who passed by with their humans. Some of those dogs were athletic and energetic, running and playing with endless stamina. They were beautiful, and I understood why people wanted them. But Beau was beautiful too, in a different way. His beauty was in his resilience, in the quiet determination that had kept him alive when his body was failing. His beauty was in the trust he'd extended to me when he had no reason to trust anyone. His beauty was in the way he'd taught me that love isn't about matching someone's energy level. It's about meeting them where they are and walking beside them as they heal. As we drove home, Beau fell asleep in the back seat, his head resting on a pillow, his breathing deep and even. I glanced at him in the rearview mirror and felt my chest swell with an emotion I didn't have words for. That night, I updated my social media for the first time in months. I posted the photo of Beau at the lake, and I wrote, 3 months ago, I went to a shelter looking for a playful, high-energy dog. I found Beau instead, a dog who couldn't lift his head because of severe anemia from tick-borne disease. Everyone thought I was crazy for adopting him. Maybe I was. But here's what I know now. The playful dog I was looking for wasn't at the front of the shelter, doing tricks and wagging his tail to strangers. He was in the back, in the quiet kennel, waiting for someone to see past his sickness to the soul underneath. Don't judge a dog by their energy level in a cage. Sometimes the quietest ones are just waiting for the blood to flow, for the oxygen to return, for the strength to show you who they really are. Sometimes they're not broken, they're just burdened. And sometimes the greatest privilege of your life is helping them carry that burden until they're strong enough to set it down. Beau taught me that running isn't about speed, it's about endurance. And love isn't about energy levels, it's about presence. We may not be training for marathons together, but we're doing something better. We're learning to breathe together, to rest together, to celebrate every small victory as the miracle it truly is. If you're thinking about adopting, look beyond the flashy, energetic dogs at the front. Walk to the back. Look in the quiet kennels. See the invisible souls. You might just find the dog who changes your life, not by matching your energy, but by teaching you what real strength looks like. The post got hundreds of likes and dozens of comments, but the one that mattered most came from Maya. This is why I do this job. Thank you for giving him his chance. I looked at Beau, curled up on his bed, the same bed he'd barely moved from for those first terrible weeks. He was snoring softly, his paws twitching in some dream that I hoped involved chasing leaves and discovering new smells and feeling the sun on his fur. "Thank you for giving me mine," I whispered. Because that's what we'd done for each other, really. I'd given him a home and medical care and the time to heal, but he'd given me something equally precious, the understanding that the best things in life aren't always the flashiest or the fastest. Sometimes they're the quiet ones in the back, waiting patiently for someone to see them, to choose them, to believe in them even when the odds seem impossible. Beau stirred in his sleep, and his tail gave a gentle wag. Even in dreams, he was finally playful, finally free from the weight that had held him down for so long. And I was finally learning to slow down, to be present, to measure success not in miles run, but in moments shared. We were breathing together, and that was everything. Before I go, take note of this canine anemia and tick-borne disease. Canine anemia, secondary to tick-borne diseases like ehrlichiosis and babesiosis, is a serious but often treatable condition. These parasites attack either the red blood cells directly or the bone marrow that produces them, leading to severe oxygen deprivation that manifests as extreme lethargy, pale gums, rapid heart rate, and weakness. Treatment typically involves aggressive antibiotic therapy, usually doxycycline, iron supplementation to support red blood cell production, supportive care including hydration and rest, regular blood work to monitor recovery. In severe cases, blood transfusions may be necessary. Recovery can take weeks to months, and dogs require strict activity restriction during treatment. However, with proper care and early intervention, many dogs make full recoveries and go on to live normal, healthy lives. If you notice symptoms of anemia in your dog, pale gums, extreme lethargy, rapid breathing, or weakness, seek veterinary care immediately. Early detection and treatment significantly improve outcomes. And if you're looking to adopt, remember, the dogs who seem broken in shelter environments may simply be waiting for the chance to heal. Give them that chance. You might just save each other. If Beau's journey touched your heart, don't let it end with a like. Hit subscribe and join Heartbound Canine Tales. Be the voice for the dogs that the world has written off, because every dog, no matter how sick or ugly, deserves a second chance to be loved. Thank you.